Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 304 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, JaysFromTheCouch.com. Here we go, Blue Jays fans. It's episode 304 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast. Blue Jays Talk for All, coming at you Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, and on our Twitter account. We come stream live, taking your questions and comments and all of that fun stuff. We put it up on the screen, and you are part of Jays from the Couch entertainment. Think about that. But if you're not available at Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, don't you worry. It's okay. The audio version will be available to you on Apple, Google, Stitcher, wherever you find podcasts. They'll be there waiting for you when you're ready. And I'm your host, as always, Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at JFtC. We've got a great episode for you this week. We're using our expanded time slot here to dive into the Blue Jays trade deadline, what chips they have available, what they could make available, what do they not want to part with, what do we not want them to part with, all of that. And of course, we'll lead off with our MLB Minute featuring Alek Manoah, as well as some fake news at the end. It's a great episode, and we're so happy you've decided to spend your time on the couch. And to help me do all of this, I would be remiss if I didn't bring in my co-hosts at this time. I probably should. Otherwise, it'll just be me. So, host of the On-Fec Circle on all of our previously mentioned channels, the audio version now available on the podcast feed as well. The On-Fec Circle, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. The Feckless Wonder himself, Steve Feck. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Shaun. You staying cool?
No. Summer is not my friend. Yeah. Let's just say that.
Neither were the Red Sox this weekend, so it's okay.
No, they were not cool at all. That gave me joy. Speaking of joy, my next co-host, host of Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, again available everywhere Jays from the Couch reaches. You'll find Sunny Side of the Dome as well. Karen Suter, good evening, Karen.
Good evening, Shaun. Good evening, Steve.
All right, so first of all, we're coming off a massive weekend right out of the gate, the All-Star break. The Blue Jays started that. They were not messing around. Started right from go. 28 runs, a beatdown of the Boston Red Sox, and then, of course, they would go on to win the series, sweep the series, which is huge. Right, because, before the All-Star break, we were kind of looking at, different scenarios and where they stood, especially in the wild card standings. But a sweep of the Boston Red Sox absolutely helped in that regard. So before we go into our MLB Minute, we're going to try not to touch and step on the toes of that MLB Minute. But I do want to go around here and kind of get your thoughts about the importance of sweeping the Red Sox this last weekend. And Karen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, they're at a point. I'm hearing on sports news shows that John Schneider basically told the team it's go time, that they need all the wins that they can get. It's late enough in the season. We're approaching the 100th game played, and it's almost the end of July. And I mean, they've done well enough to be in a wild card playoff spot, but compared to expectations, most people have to say they've underperformed. And now is the time to perform the way that they were expected to. No more 1-9 stretches. Just get it done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, Steve, that doesn't mean that they're obviously going to win every single game from here until the end of the season. Obviously, there are going to be losses, and there may be, there may even be a 1-9 stretch in there because it's baseball. Who knows? right? We can't count on them winning every game. But Steve, the importance of winning those first three is huge for their A, momentum, and B, obviously playoff hopes in general, right?
Oh, absolutely. And then I know we've debated this before where I say that really when every one win against a division rival is really two wins over the course of how everything plays out, because you're causing them to get a loss, to drop further behind, and you're getting a win. Now, mathematically, being formulatic, it doesn't really work that way, but it's from a standings and a competitive standpoint, really, a sweep is 6 wins because you're +6 because you've got 3 wins and your opponent had 3 losses. So that's sort of where I come from. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I think it's something they had to do, even if they won 2 out of 3. Because I mean, that was the big thing with the 28-5 blowout. I'm like, they're going to come out flat. It's just baseball, yin and yang. It's going to happen. Thankfully, it didn't. But just winning the series starts you off on the right foot. And then, now the Cardinals come in. You've got, big games coming up, really pretty much scattered through from now to the end of the season. So I really think that getting off to that nice start, and when you score 28 runs, suddenly you're on everybody's radar. Now, suddenly all the pundits and all of the experts here in the States are going to talk about, the Blue Jays. Well, they put up a 28 spot against the Red Sox. Blah, blah, blah. So now suddenly everybody's paying attention again. And it's not just the off-season media darling kind of stuff. So I think that will be helpful too, getting the Blue Jays out there in the public conscious. Maybe pick up a couple of stray fans that are looking for a new team to root for.
Well, or just, some of those stray fans who kind of lost their way from the Blue Jays bandwagon, they'll find their way back now, right? But there's this one question, though, I kind of want to put to both of you, because it's one I get everywhere, all the time, ever since Charlie Montoyo was fired. How much of the recent success, and if you want to include before the All-Star break and after the All-Star break, because that's, the 10th inning there, that win there, that was a gutsy win. And John Schneider was there for that. So I guess my question is, how much of this recent stretch, including the right before and right after the All-Star break, Karen, how much of that do you think has to do with John Schneider, either behind closed doors or in the dugout?
I mean, so far, I like what I've seen of him as a manager, and I'm not just talking about the wins and losses. The wins and losses are great, but I'm paying attention to the in-game moves that he's making. I'm paying attention to him leaving Barrios out for one extra batter where I think Montoyo probably would have pulled him. I'm looking at him not using Tim Meza last night where Montoyo, God love him, was obsessed with matchups. And just things like that. Like, he seems to be making the moves that are working. So I don't know what it is. I think I've generally always been of the mind that it's mostly the players that win or lose. Now, you can have a very poor strategist that loses you games that you should have won, but I think John Schneider is doing well. I think his contribution is a positive one. Maybe let's call it 25% him and 75% the players. He's bringing out in them what they were always supposed to be. So.
And Steve, I think that's what I kind of meant by behind closed doors, right? Because Karen's absolutely right. Once the game starts, it's by and large the players who dictate the outcome of that game. In fact, a manager really shouldn't. If a manager is, their one thing loses a game for them, there's something wrong there, right? So it should be on the players. However, Steve, behind closed doors, we've heard a number of times since Montoyo was fired in that a manager has to be able to light a fire under those players in order to go out and do their thing, right? So, Steve, I guess my question to you is, do you think that John Schneider is impacting what we're seeing, or is this just a stretch that they happen to be playing well in?
No, I think he absolutely has an impact because, again, behind closed doors, Schneider seems to like to have the one-on-one conversations with his players. You saw it with the Manoah situation, at Fenway, sitting them down, saying, "Look, love the fire, but you got to turn it back." And there's one thing about lighting a fire and then causing an inferno. I mean, you always have those people, you go to the backyard barbecues and they're like squeezing, the lighter fluid for like 10 minutes, going to get a second can. And then suddenly, it's like Hiroshima all over again. And all the food just incinerates. You want that fire hot, but you want it to be a constant heat that gives a player the confidence to, if the player feels, okay, if I dive for this ball, I can catch it. Or if that pitcher says, I know the scouting report says I shouldn't throw sliders, in the middle of the at bat to this guy. I think I can get this guy to chase. So when you have that kind of confidence, you can take those little liberties as a player. If it doesn't work out, players can fess up to it, and I'm sure Schneider would be the type, rather than scold him or say that's scouting, we need to stick to the scouting report. Scouting report says this, the matchup says this. The player knows he can then go to Schneider and say, hey, look, my bad. This is what I was thinking. And I think Schneider can connect with the players on that level where Montoya was more, I don't want to say robotic because I don't think that's necessarily fair, but he loved him in some matchups. He had the game reports coming down, and he felt you don't fluctuate from them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, I noticed little things, particularly in that very first game, that John Schneider just does differently. Personally, I love the arm around Manoah and everybody, you know what I mean? His announcement to Santiago Espinal for the All-Star game, any manager could have said, come into my office, but instead, if I'm not mistaken, he even told Santiago Espinal, we have a meeting, make sure everybody comes. Right? That's the kind of thing that I think players can really understand, the human side of things. Excuse me. And I think that makes you just want to play better, So there's also that. Regardless, 28 runs, a sweep, things are looking good. Just good, and I couldn't care less if it's John Schneider or Charlie Montoya or John Gibbons or even the guy who lied about being in the war, Tim Johnson. I don't really care. I'm enjoying the right now, right? Particularly because of Alek Manoah, and I think that's where we'll kick off our MLB Minute here. And Steve, I'll throw it to you here to tee it up for us. But if you're new to Jays from the Couch, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you subscribe and all that stuff. I have to throw it out there. Just doing my job, as they say. But the MLB Minute, every Sunday is the goal, where Steve writes an MLB Minute, a look around Major League Baseball, things that are going on there around and in every different aspect. Steve has done an excellent job of covering different angles around baseball, and it's been a real treat. So make sure you catch those at thejaysfromthecouch.com on our website. But then we take one particular tidbit from that MLB Minute and we bring it here to the podcast, and we then each take 1 minute to go around the table and opine, if you will, on the topic of the day. And this week we decided we had to talk about Alek Manoah. We have to. We would be not doing our jobs properly if we didn't. So Steve, go ahead. I'll let you tee it up for us since you wrote it, and then I'll get the old timer here ready.
Okay. Well, basically, I wanted to not just take sides on what Manoah did, not necessarily be all pro Blue Jay fan looking at it. I mean, there are potential ramifications when you have a teammate that is so vocal and so passionate. Not everybody is going to appreciate it, especially anybody's that just gave up 28 runs the night before. So I just basically said or proposed, hey, he probably has a target on his back now. And it might not just be he that pays the price. I mean, when you had pitchers like Clemens and or like a guy like AJ Przinsky, he didn't necessarily get hit because the umpires knew, okay, you're throwing at Przinsky. Your teammates got hit. So you have to hope that your teammates are all behind you. And based on the other day, the Blue Jays love playing with Alek Manoah. So that's why I kind of put it out there saying, okay, between the All-Star game and what happened the other day, that target's getting bigger. He's got those broad shoulders anyway. But it might make it even more fun.
Mm-hmm. Right, just like it did in the All-Star game. So, 1 minute each. Alek Manoah putting a target on his and his team's back. I'll leave it at that because I don't want to influence everybody's 1 minute. So, Karen, we will start with you. And go.
Yeah, so, I mean, I watched all of those games. I watched the Manoah game, and it's that faintly reminded me a little bit of Marcus Stroman, how competitive he was, how he would get into verbal exchanges, shall we say, with batters on opposing teams at times. And I mean, I think it's great. I think it's just part of the whole package. Manoah isn't just good physically, mechanically, but he's got this fire, this passion, this drive to win. And I think it's only going to benefit. I think the rest of the team does too. I just think it's part of what a competitive team wants to have. As opposed to a center fielder that not only does the ball go way over his head, but once he realizes it, just stands there and doesn't even know.
I don't know what you could have been referring to there, Karen.
Maybe he was waiting for a new moon on Monday. I don't know, but...
Maybe he thought it was the Green Monster and that it would bounce back to him or something. And
even though the Green Monster's in left field, yeah, but yeah, right, yeah.
Right. He got lost. Yeah, he's just a kid, man. Like Fenway Park is small, yes, but it's so easy to get lost in. Like, out there on the field. Anyway, Steve, your 1 minute begins now.
Well, it's kind of ironic that this is episode 304 because 304 is the area code for West Virginia, where I first came across Alek Manoah. And from the minute I put eyes on him, I fell in love with him, even as a college pitcher. I didn't even know where he was going to pitch, but I knew wherever he pitched, I was going to watch him. And I think his teammates, all through the minors and now with the Blue Jays, have fallen in love with them too. They realize there's going to be some brushback. They're going to have to answer dumb questions from reporters. They may be having to maybe stand up for him in a brawl or maybe get brushed back when Alek gets really, really passionate. But it's all worth it. What he brings, you can't buy. You can't teach. It's just instinctual for him. So we should enjoy it while we can.
Right. My 1 minute would be...
Remember,
go ahead, Karen.
I'm trying to cut in. Remember, if I may, you said all through the minors, his minor league career spanned 9 games. So he was that good and they needed pitching. He didn't last in the minors too long.
Yeah, well, I was referring really more to the camp.
Okay.
During 2020. I misspoke. I should have been more specific about that. You're absolutely correct. But I mean, everybody loves him. They just, he's really. And Stroman was that kind of guy too. I wish I hadn't used up my waxing poetic about area code 304, because Stroman, everybody loved him. Now Blue Jay fans were like, well, yeah, but he was a little over the top. Now he wasn't over the top when he was doing it for you. So,
well, I don't know. There was a bit of a divide, I think, in Blue Jays, in the fan base, when it came to Marcus Stroman. But I'll start my 1 minute now. And maybe when we're done, we can talk about this Marcus Stroman comparison, because I'm actually, as soon as we end this show, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a little piece about why the Blue Jays need Alek Manoah, and not even the pitcher. But they need that personality. So I'll go ahead and do my 1 minute before I use it all up. But here we go. Yeah, so we saw Alek Manoah mic'd up during the All-Star game. They chose very carefully, and they chose rather well. They knew what they were doing when they gave him a microphone to pitch, right? He exudes the love of the game. And that is the first reason why the Toronto Blue Jays need that. They need somebody to go out there and take center stage, literally, all eyes on that person, and just give it every ounce of energy they have and every ounce of passion they have. There's a difference between trying super hard and loving while you're trying super hard, right? And that's Alek Manoah. That's what he does. He loves being there. He loves and striking people out and all of that stuff. They need that. They need somebody who is going to brush back and pitch inside. Alek Manoah will absolutely do that, and he's not afraid to do it. And he will tell you, yep, I just did that, and that is what it is. You should go sit down, right? Because, oh man, the 1 minute feels much, much quicker when you're actually talking. But let's talk about this Marcus Stroman comparison here, because I think it's a valid one. I think it's an excellent one, and in my head, I have to mention it in the piece I'll be writing here this evening, because you can't talk about Alek Manoah in this context, the context of being vocal, screaming and jawing at other players. You can't talk about that without talking about Marcus Stroman, in my mind. So, to me, there's a difference here in that Marcus Stroman did it with a chip, an angry chip on his shoulder, and Alek Manoah, to me, does it in a completely different way. It's just a joy of competing and love, because when you see him off the mound, he's smiling and carrying on and joking around. He's got the biggest smile of anybody. Teoscar Hernandez is like, wow, that guy's got a nice smile. This is Alek Manoah enjoying baseball just because he gets to play it, where I think Marcus Stroman was always trying to prove something, to everybody, whether you were in a conversation with him or not. He just always wanted you to know, look, this is me, this is me, this is me. And I don't think Alek Manoah fits that mold. Certainly not physically, but Karen, I'll throw that to you just to get your thoughts on the Marcus Stroman and Alek Manoah comparison there.
Yeah, I think you touched on something real there. And I mean, from all that I've heard about Marcus Stroman, that, having the physical stature that he does, that he was told over and over again, you're not going to make it as a major leaguer. You're certainly not going to make it as a pitcher. You're too small, blah, 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 blah. And he had to work twice as hard just to show everybody that, yes, I can do this. Well, I can't imagine anybody saying that to or about Alek Manoah just by looking at him. I mean, he's a big man. He's an imposing presence. So, yeah, I mean, in a way, I don't want it to sound like pity, but someone who, for one reason or another, has kind of been the underdog and, right or wrong, feels like they've got to keep going out and proving people wrong that don't believe in them. Whereas, yeah, Alek Manoah, it wouldn't seem like he has had that in his past.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. Steve, when you look at these two pitchers, I think they're very different in a number of ways, physically, obviously, but also in their quote unquote stuff. Velocity, certainly, all of that. So, Steve, is that it might be a natural comparison, but is it really a fair comparison to compare those two?
Well, I think it's fair on the level that the passion that came out on the field came from the same place. Now, it's true, Marcus Stroman, this is a guy at my strapping 5'8" now. I mean, I was 5'3" all through high school and junior high trying to play sports. So I understand, that chip on the shoulder. But you have to remember, too, that, okay, Alek Manoah played major conference baseball at West Virginia. I mean, I love their baseball field. I love their baseball program. West Virginia is not USC or Texas or Oklahoma State or any other big school in the SEC. He didn't get scholarship offers from the big schools, so he could have. So really, he went to WVU because they were one of the few schools that saw something in him as a high schooler. So despite his big size and everything, he's had to really prove himself too. Even as a freshman, I wouldn't say that scouts were saying, "Yeah, this guy's a major league pitcher." They were there looking at other players at WVU, but he took command of the situation. And he channeled that confidence and brought it out into the field and became success. So I would say that the passion on the field is exactly the same. But right, the off the field stuff, the Marcus, look at me kind of stuff. Yeah, okay, right. That got to be a little bit much. But really, it came from a sincere, natural source in both of them on the field. And that's why I compare them only from a competitive standpoint, what's going on the field, not necessarily the personalities.
Right. And that's a fair statement. I think it's rather interesting that that here we have two young pitchers that have grabbed the attention of the fan base, and yet it feels so different this time around. But of course, hopefully Alek Manoah will be with the Blue Jays for an incredibly long time, as opposed to being traded like Marcus Stroman was not too long ago. But that does lead us to the kind of meat and potatoes of this episode here. We're going to talk about trade chips that the Blue Jays may have available, and I think that I wrote this that there may be some pain coming at the trade deadline where somebody gets traded that we don't want traded necessarily. Excuse me. We've become attached to some of these guys, and so there may be one or two on their way playing somewhere else, and that as well goes for these prospects. I think more now than ever. And Steve, you've been following baseball, part of baseball for much longer than I have. I think now more than ever, though, the fan base is more aware of and more attached to minor league players as well than perhaps they have been. Because the sheer volume of information that's out there for us to kind of look like the recent draft, for example. A lot more people are like, yes, that was a great pick and get super excited about it, as opposed to before. But it was like, okay, they drafted so and so, that's great. We won't see him for 6 years, so who cares? And so I think there's a different attitude there. So with that in mind, becoming attached to these prospects, I think we'll just go rattle off, some names here, and we'll go around the table and get your thoughts on what value they have and the likelihood of them being dealt in the next few days here. I can't believe it's only a few days, but right. So let's start with the big roster. And I have to start with an interesting name, because if this was 4 months ago, we would have thought that this man would be playing elsewhere at the trade deadline. But now here he is, an all-star, starting catcher in the all-star game. Alejandro Kirk was perhaps a trade chip. My question to you now is, Karen, is he now. Is this the time? Because I feel like for years we've been saying, trade him now, sell high on Alejandro Kirk. Now's the time. No, now's the time. But now he's an all-star, carried the team for a good chunk of time. Is he, Karen, still a trade chip? Is he untouchable? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, my untouchables and the team's untouchables are probably two very different things. There are probably very few actual untouchables. I just, at this point, and I was all in the off season, I was all on team let's trade Kirk for a very good return. Not to just give him away for nothing and hope for the best. But at this point, it would be very hard to trade him, at least during the season. I mean, like, he's the starting catcher at the All-Star game. He's been one of the hitting stars of the team. Even his defense has probably been a lot better than many people expected. So if they're trying to win now, I don't see how you can trade Kirk.
And it's such a tough situation now. But Steve, let's get your thoughts on Alejandro Kirk heading into the trade deadline.
He's played his way into untouchable status at this point. And this is from the guy that's everybody's available. I think there's only one truly untouchable player in Toronto, and that's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Anybody else at any other time is available. That includes all the prospects. I think Vladdy's really the only guy where there would be riots if he ever got traded. But yeah, Kirk, he's proven himself. Why would you trade him? You have two starting pitchers, Alek Manoah being the most prominent, that love throwing to him. I mean, that's his guy. That's who he wants to throw to. So I just cannot envision any package, whether it be Juan Soto or Shohei Ohtani or whoever you want to throw out there. I don't see Alejandro Kirk getting traded, certainly not during the season, and I don't even see it to start, over the winter to start next year.
Yeah, it's tough to imagine at this point. But I think it's worth mentioning, you mentioned how Alek Manoah loves throwing to Kirk, but his battery mate, or not, I shouldn't say that, his catching partner, the other catcher, Danny Jansen, has developed a reputation for managing a pitching staff and his defense and all of that too. And with Gabriel Moreno kind of right here, he's not even like down the road. He's literally kind of breathing down Danny Jansen's neck a little bit. So Karen, same stuff here with Danny Jansen this time. Does he have trade value, and is now maybe the time to consider trading him?
Does he have trade value? Certainly, for all that he brings to the team and to the game. I mean, even though he hasn't played all that many games this season, when he's out there, he hits. I mean, he hit a couple of home runs just the other day. And, I mean, he's been a Gold Glove finalist behind the plates. He's solid that way. And yeah, everything you hear about, he's great at calling a game. I mean, they could trade him, and they should get a solid return back for him if they do. I feel like a better use would be to keep Danny Jansen, bring Gabriel Moreno back up at some point this year, and have him watch Danny Jansen call games, because people keep saying, well, if there's one area of his game that really needs the most improvement, it's learning how to call a game. So watch someone who's known for calling a very good game, like just sit in the dugout and watch pitch by pitch, what is he doing, and learn from him in that way. So yeah, there's a couple different ways they could go. That's my thought as to maybe what they should do.
Right, and it would work because the minor league season ends well before the major league season, so you wouldn't even have to make a roster move. You could just be there as a the fly on the wall, right. But is there now, with Alejandro Kirk kind of playing his way into this, almost cementing himself on this roster, and Danny Jansen with the value he has to this roster? Now, before I actually continue, I should say that none of this conversation that we've started and that we will continue as we go down through other trade chips, none of that is saying that the Blue Jays are looking to trade and get rid of these people. Right? This is, in order to get something, you have to give, right? And where the Blue Jays are right now, the giving may have to come from the big league roster, and that's just kind of a nature of the beast sort of thing. So I don't want anybody to mistake saying that we're on here saying they have to trade Alejandro Kirk and they have to trade Danny Jansen. That's not what we're saying at all. It's just somebody's going to ask. Like if you want to use Juan Soto as the example, they're going to ask for something. Right, so we're trying to kind of look at who are these logical trade targets that other teams may value, which brings me to Gabriel Moreno. Right, up until now, untouchable. The Blue Jays have made it clear he's untouchable. Is he, with the emergence of Alejandro Kirk and the way Danny Jansen is starting to turn things around, has Gabriel Moreno made himself, or is he finding himself kind of now potentially trade bait? Or do you think the Blue Jays are like, we'll keep him as long as we can? Karen?
Yeah, I mean, what a good problem to have three very talented, either MLB or pretty much MLB ready catchers, one who looks like a future star. I mean, again, before the season, I would have said, no, you don't trade him. He's your catcher of the future. And he very well still might be. I mean, they brought him up, and we got to look at some really incredible tools. And then ultimately, when he was sent back down, the numbers had dwindled. Now, that's not necessarily a knock on him. But more often than not, you bring up a raw rookie, and he struggles because there's an adjustment to be made to Major League Baseball. I mean, do you make the commitment to keep Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk as your catching tandem? And then what kind of a haul can you get for Gabriel Moreno, either by himself or part of a package? I mean, I'm still hoping they keep him, but I mean, if their focus has shifted in that way, then what kind of awesome return could this young man bring the organization? So different ways to look at it.
Oh, absolutely. And it turns out Rocket was thinking right along the same lines I was watching on YouTube. Thanks, Rocket, for chiming in here. The actual question is now, is Moreno the actual trade chip? It would be very interesting. And here, I don't know, because, Steve, the one thing that's coming in the back of my head is Danny Jansen's going to be a free agent soon-ish, in comparison to Gabriel Moreno, who isn't. And the Blue Jays are at a point where they actually have to start thinking about these things. What is payroll going to look like 2 years, 3 years down the road? And so Gabriel Moreno obviously can help with that. So, Steve, is he a trade chip now?
Again, I think you'd have to consider putting him in a package if you're talking about bringing back a major arm or a big bat. But people need to remember, too, that Moreno didn't come up as a catcher. He was converted to a catcher. He has the athleticism that he can play at different spots in the field. So just as a scenario, you can bring him up. You can play him. You can let him play third to rest Chapman. You can let him fool around in the outfield. If you're playing the Tigers or we can't even say the Orioles anymore, but you can have him, have him there, and then you ride out Jansen until he reaches free agency, and then you still keep, let Moreno catch at least one game or two games, during the course of a week. Kirk can DH as well as catch. So you could use those three catchers because of the uniqueness of each of those three catchers. I mean, Kirk could just hit. You could wake him up, he'd grab a bat, and he would, hit a liner, into one of the gaps. Moreno can play different places, and if you're honest with him and you explain, look, this is what we're doing. We want you. We want you to get, your at bats. We know what a terrific offensive player you are, but you might need to play around at different positions for a little while until Danny Jansen moves on in free agency, or until we would move Jansen. And then just one quick thing about Jansen. Ordinarily, I don't buy into all the stuff you see out there on, I shouldn't say on podcasts because, well, we're a podcast, but, but out there in other markets, and other social media things. But I was listening to a Marlins podcast, and Danny Jansen came up as a trade target for them, somebody that the Marlins are looking at. I'm like, I mean, they'd have two great catchers then, but Then I was listening to an Oakland A's podcast. I don't have much of a life, so I do this a lot. And Danny Jansen's name came up again. So, one random mention, it's just people just trying to get people to react. But when you hear it in different markets, two very diverse markets, maybe there's some smoke there. I'm not saying that there is, and I don't think they should trade Jansen at this point. But when names pop up in different markets, and it's not JP Morosi bringing up the name, then you say, yes, maybe there's something to it. Hard to say.
Right.
But I would say no. You can still utilize Moreno at other positions without having to move him and put him in a package.
Right. Fair enough. So let's move further down the prospect list, and let's talk about Aurelvis Martinez. I honestly think he's gone by the trade deadline. If they're going to stick with, we cannot part with Moreno, then okay, well, he's your first prospect, but we're going number 2. Then you got to give us number 2, and I think that long and short of it, it's a little upsetting for me personally because I think that I've been waiting for a power hitting infielder from the left side for a long time. A long time. And so it hurts. That one's going to hurt. However, flags fly forever, so go get a flag. That's all I care about at this point. But Karen, where are you on the Aurelvis Martinez and his stock, his value?
Oh, he's going to love it in Cincinnati.
Well,
I've been hearing great things about him. Either way, whether he stays or whether Elvis leaves the building, I have all the hopes and all the wishes in the world for him to have a great career. There's no doubt about his ability to hit home runs. I think I said a while ago, he could have come up and participated in the MLB Home Run Derby right now. It's the other areas of his game that apparently are needing some work. And he's, 19, 20 years old. He's still kind of figuring things out in AA, which is not bad for someone his age. But he's probably at least a couple of years away. So, I would love to keep absolutely all of them. Like you said, if you're going for it and if you're looking for a significant ad, then you have to give someone up to get someone. So, yeah, that would probably be my first choice at this point for someone with upside that could help bring a significant return, which they need. They need better pitching. Yeah. So to say, but have a great career elsewhere.
Now, Steve, because of your insight into the kind of how do I say this? Into the kind of the scouting side of things, and the context of baseball in 2022, a guy who could come up, as Karen said, at 19, 20 years old, come up and participate in the home run derby at the major league level. He's got the power. That sells as far as what other teams are looking for, does it not?
Oh, it absolutely does. And Karen mentioned Cincinnati. It's a good ballpark to be a power hitter. I don't know that there's a dire need for him because they've got Jonathan India and several other really good young infielders, but I can see him being a Cub. So if the Pirates are going out, if the Blue Jays are going out to get David Robertson, and the Cubs have told Ian Happ that he's probably going to get dealt. You get a switch hitting hitter with some pop like Happ and David Robertson a deal, or Elvis Martinez is the new Javier Baez for the Cubs. And it's the kind of player that Jed Hoyer loves. So I can see that happening.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, whichever team it is, and it's almost impossible to guess, who wants Elvis Martinez, because I think there are 29 other teams who would love to have him. But I think we can. It sounds like we all agree that he's the next one. Like he's being traded, probably in the next 8 days or so. So, Ricky Tiedemann. Going down the prospect list, this guy has just come on fire this year and shot up the system. His value has, to this date, has never been higher. So, let me throw it to you again, Karen. It is the Toronto Blue Jays themselves have said it is way harder to draft and develop top-line pitching. Here, they have a guy who kind of said, hey, look at me, I'm shooting up your system here. Karen, do you really see them including him? Or do you think they may have to kind of be forced to include him?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's another tough one. I almost have to flip a coin. There's a big part of me that wants to say, no, you don't trade him. You keep him and build around him in the future. Because, I mean, as far as your rotation, you've got Alek Manoah, and that's great. And that the other 4/5 of your rotation are like younger-ish veterans in Barrios to, middle-aged veterans when MLB average age of player or pitcher is your comparison base. And it's, to have someone, a homegrown talent that looks like he could have success, but part of me really wants to hang on to him. But again, you can't. I mean, I'm reminded a little bit of David Price and Daniel Norris, and that, Norris was one of their higher ranked pitching prospects, and look at him now. And unfortunately, in MLB terms, he hasn't had a heck of a lot of success. So again, while you're certainly not pushing him out the door, Tiedemann, but and only if the return is top notch. Like maybe or Elvis goes to Chicago and maybe Tiedemann goes to Cincinnati. I don't know. But if it gets to Jays, Castillo, and Robertson.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Steve, there's the question when it comes to Tiedemann. Like, do you trade what could be for what is? And is it acceptable to throw Tiedemann in there?
It is, because he's a pitcher. I think it's harder to trade quote-unquote sure thing hitters than it is pitchers, because the injury risk is so high for phenom pitchers. Well, let me present for your approval Nate Pearson. Do you think the Jays, a lot of Jays fans wouldn't love to have seen Nate Pearson traded before? I mean, they were wrong to say that necessarily in 2020, but I'm sure there were offers for Pearson that were just dismissed last year or at the deadline last year. And now, for really a third straight season, Pearson's injuries, illnesses, whatever that it is, have rendered him more of a question mark. And Daniel Norris is a great example. So if you're getting something that is as close to a sure thing for this year, this pennant race. And if you really believe that you're better than the Yankees and better than the Astros in a 7-game series and can get to the World Series, then you say, sure, whatever. Orelvis, Otto Lopez, whoever you want to talk about, send them. But I think a pitcher, I think he has maybe exceeded expectations. That's another thing. Sometimes you sell high on a pitcher who, I mean, not that he was, undrafted and they found him, cleaning a bar at night, Ross Atkins and LaCava was leaving a bar and he was bringing the bottles out back to be picked up. It's not like he was that kind of a warming good luck story, but nobody really expected him to reach the heights he has so quickly. So I would say you sell high, and it's the Blue Jays were masters of that, having prospects that they just built up. The Braves too, mainly in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, that ultimately never really panned out, but everybody was falling over each other to try to get them. And I think this might be a case where, okay, it could come back and burn us. If we're getting an AL pennant out of it, okay, I'll lick my wounds and accept it and say, look, I said you can deal with them, and hey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and kind of my stance on the whole trading pitching thing is that I really feel like with hitting, it's a progression. Unless there's like some insane superstar like a Bryce Harper or something like that, right? Where you can identify at a super young age that this is Vlad Jr., the same thing, But pitching, I would say that the David Prices, those are guys who are like, they go near the beginning of the draft, like one of the first picks, and they are studs right from the moment they were picked. And you typically, those are the guys who come up and, you really regret trading those guys as a youngster. I think more often what you see is kind of fizzling or flashes of greatness or streakiness or whatever. And Steve, you mentioned the susceptibility to injury. All of those things kind of combine for me, unless it's like one of those very rare picks that you see in a draft. I don't really necessarily worry about losing pitching for that reason, because look at like the list of we'll look at this person, Noah Syndergaard, for example, right? That's a perfect example of a guy who had all the talent in the world, could not stay healthy, and then look at him now, and he's kind of average with the Angels, having to take a 1-year contract just to hopes that he could turn that into something, and he might not. Those are the kind of things, the cautionary tales. There are more of those, I think, than those sure bets, and that's why I have no problem trading a Tiedemann or really almost any pitcher, really.
Yeah, let me turn it around to you. Gunnar Hoagland, number 1 pick last year. If he does come back healthy, he's going to win a Cy Young somewhere down the road for Oakland, or wherever he ends up if Oakland trades him. You'd still make the deal because you got Matt Chapman, right?
Yes, I would have traded one of my own kids for Matt Chapman. So they're not listening, hopefully.
Good.
But yes, I would have made that deal 100%, because you're trading for what is, and you're giving away what could be, and we run our house the same way. We trade for what is as opposed to what could be, and our bank account is the same. What are we saving for? We're saving for a rainy day. Well, guess what? It rains at least once a week. What are we saving for? Anyway, I think I got off track there. What I do want to do, though, is bring it back to a couple more before we run out of time here, big league roster members, and I'm going to do it, start right off the bat, Karen, with Lourdes Gurriel. For all of the reasons that you don't want to trade him, those are the exact reasons that make him such a good trade chip. And we've said this a million times on the show, I feel like, but this trade deadline in particular, a left fielder who is hitting out of his mind, one of the better hitters in baseball, and has such a team-friendly deal. Karen, I know you understand that he has trade value, but maybe I'll throw it to you so you can make the argument that he has more value by not trading him.
Yeah. Don't subtract from the major league roster. I mean, this is a team that is trying to win now. We've seen what they can do at times. Like you keep this group together. One of the things that I don't want to do is subtract from. They've actually built some reasonably decent depth in terms of their position players. Because with Ronald Tapia heating up the way he has since like the middle of May, for Pete's sake, I mean, they really got lightning in a bottle with him. That if one of the regulars needs a day off or to DH, the way Springer seems to need a fair bit of the time, then plug Tapia in and he actually brings something of value. And I mean, you can say the same with the infielders because you've got Guerrero, then you've got Biggio who can play second and first, you've got Espinal who can play second, short, and third. So I mean, if any one of them needs any time off, they can fill in for each other. But I just between what he brings on the field and the chemistry within the team, and you always see them joking around together. Like I wouldn't trade him. If there are needs, if they want to upgrade the pitching, there are other ways to do it. So,
So Steve, now you have heard. You know where I'm coming from. I don't want Lourdes Gurriel traded, but I would not be surprised for everything I've said. So, Steve, as of right now, does he represent serious trade value in trade talks?
He is the most valuable trade commodity the Blue Jays have. In the majors and the minors, he is the most valuable. Because of his contract, and because what name always comes up when you're if you're watching endlessly on Sportsnet or MLB Network or Fox Sports, what name always comes up when they're talking about the Blue Jays? What guy would have to be included in a deal? And it's not Peterman or Elvis Martinez or Gabriel Moreno. It's Lourdes Gurriel. So when it's that universally accepted that that's the guy that's going to bring you the big piece. We're not getting Juan Soto. Okay, we're not getting Shohei Ohtani. We might get Luis Castillo. So, I think now you need to get a lot more back than, you can't just give them Gurriel for Castillo straight up. I think you need to get something back that's going to help your major league team and then sprinkle it with some prospects. But Lourdes Gurriel Jr. he's the most valuable guy. I don't want to see him traded. But I mean, again, we're in a different stage now as Blue Jays fans. We went through the rebuild. We saw these young guys where you were talking earlier about falling in love with prospects and reading so much about them. It's now or never. It's do or die, whatever, cliche you want to use. You need to do it now. And if getting that big pitcher is I don't think you trade him for a bat, but if you're getting a big monster pitcher, I think you have to think about it.
Yeah. It depends for me, it depends on how much you trust Tapia and his hitting out of his mind. How much you trust that? That's the first question they have to answer for me. And then, of course, is it worth it? Like, is Tapia going to make up for the loss of Lourdes combined with whatever you gain from the pitcher you pick up? That, it's not just a simple 1-for-1, we need to replace X with another X. It could be we need to replace X with a Y and Z to make the overall better, so there's a lot that go into that. But, I'm not as attached to Gurriel as some people may be, but I also see the value that he has both as a trade chip and to the club itself. And the last one I want to talk about, because Will is watching on Facebook and he's got some good questions here. I want to throw them up before we run out of time. But the other one I want to talk about is Teoscar Hernandez, who is nearing the end of his contract here in Toronto. Power bat could be used to gain, if they were interested, could be used to gain a rather significant return. So Karen, it took us a long time. It took me longer than it did you, but to come around to Teoscar is for real. And I'm there, just so we're clear. I've been there now. But Karen, Teoscar Hernandez, trade chip or not?
I mean, again, if they were rebuilding, you could trade them both and get a good jump start on your future, assuming that neither of them are going to be extended, re-signed, and I hope they can find a way to at least keep one of them. But, I mean, they're going for it. You don't subtract good players from the major league team, because it's not like Atlanta years ago when they traded away Jermaine Dye to make room for Andrew Jones. That the Blue Jays don't have that in their outfield. They've got that potentially at catcher, but I don't think that you subtract from your major league team guys that are productive and help you win when there isn't an obvious replacement. And again, I mean, they're a team. You see them together all the time, talking and joking around, and I wouldn't do it, and I hope they don't.
Right. And Steve, the other side of that too is that any team that takes on Teoscar has to be thinking about their own competitive window, right? And so if you're going to trade for a Teoscar Hernandez, you got to kind of think you're ready to win quickly too, right?
Yes, or you could be a team that needs a solid veteran bat while they're bringing young guys up. I don't know. They would never trade him to Tampa Bay because Ross would just never make a trade like that within the division. But again, going back to the Cubs, you trade Teoscar Hernandez to the Cubs in a deal, and you get Robertson, a solid closer, and you get Ian Happ in that package. Ian Happ's a better defensive outfielder at all three positions than Teoscar would ever put up, and he may be as good as George Springer as a center fielder. I mean, he's a switch hitter. He's got some pop. He's a good base runner. So, I mean, I would try to convince every team asking about Lourdes to take Teoscar. Just like you sell high on minor league pitchers, you sell high on major league bats. And he'll never have a bigger value than that. And if you get another outfielder back, I think actually Ian Happ, a player like that, would make the Jays a more dangerous lineup because of his on base, because of his base running, and because of the defense he also provides. I think they've had plenty of home run pop. They don't. Sure, it'll be sad to see him go. They're not really going to miss Hernandez like they would miss Lourdes, because Lourdes has that it quality in the dugout, on the field. You talk about Manoah loving to play baseball. Lourdes Gurriel loves to play baseball. So you could make up for Teoscar getting peddled, but I don't know that you can make up Lourdes. What Lourdes brings, you can't make up in a trade, but you can by moving Teoscar Hernandez.
Right. Now, the only thing that I would say to that is, if you're going to consider trading Teoscar Hernandez, that has to be an off-season type move, because I think, Karen's point about disrupting the clubhouse and the chemistry that they have together, I really believe removing Gurriel or Teoscar from that mid-season might be a bad idea. You want as much chemistry and mojo going as you can, and removing one of them from that, I think you're asking for trouble in that sense. Now, I don't have a problem trading from a big league roster in the offseason, I think that Blue Jays fans, if you're old enough, will remember trading Fred McGriff and Tony Fernandez for Joe Carter and Roberto Alomar. And that was a heartbreaker. That was really tough for a lot of people. Tony Fernandez, one of my favorite Blue Jays of all time. And Fred McGriff is like, these are two significant pieces that they gave up. And they did, whether you make the argument or not, we're not really going to get into whether one package was more valuable than the other, but it led to a championship, right? So that's where I am. But if you're going to pull from the big league roster on a team that relies so heavily on the chemistry that they have in that clubhouse, I would suggest maybe, the offseason might be the better time for that. That's all.
That's why Schneider in the dugout rather than Charlie Montoyo would be the difference maker on that. You can't make that deal with Charlie Montoyo as a manager. And this isn't a me knocking on Charlie, but Schneider can pull it together. I mean, right. Schneider, if anybody could pull a team together, because he's been there with them at so many different levels before coming up to the major league club, it would be Schneider. So I think they could weather Hernandez, and I don't know that they could weather what Hernandez and Biggio they could weather. Everybody else, I think it would be a chemistry thing, like you said, that would be tough.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Biggio would be fine. The chemistry would be just anyway. Yeah. However, we are reaching the end of our show, and I wanted to get some of these comments up here. People watching at home. So first of all, Christian Rao, the Rao Report, is watching. He says, just trade for Randall Grichuk and all will be right with the world. Christian is very clearly sleep deprived from his new baby. So I'm going to let that pass. It's either the new baby or he's so high on the Baltimore Orioles that he just is not thinking clearly. So, however, when he is thinking clearly, he does great work at Slasher Sports. So everybody should check out his Major League Baseball podcast, because if you don't, then you don't know what you're doing. Will, watching on Facebook, Will Shelley says, what player that none of us wants to see get traded is most likely to get traded? I'm going to go say Danny Jansen. He was either that or Kevin Biggio, but I'm going to go with Danny Jansen. Karen?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Danny Jansen.
And I saved Steve for last because he's always good for something nobody was ever thinking about. So go ahead, Steve.
I'm really resisting throwing out what I was going to say, but honestly, I think it's Lourdes Gurriel. I really do, and it does hurt, Karen. Honest to God, it hurt. I'm not just saying it just to get you bummed out here. I really think he's the guy. If a big piece is going to go, I think it's Lourdes, because that means it's a big deal.
Right.
It's not just some tit for tat. Let's pick up a veteran bullpen arm. It's a big deal. So you're bringing in a Barrios type return, sending Gurriel out there. So
interesting. Okay. And Will also asked another excellent question. Will, thanks for these questions. These are awesome. Of all the players available on the market, what player do you guys think the Jays are most likely to acquire? So, I mean, obviously the biggest entrant into the market would be Juan Soto. I'm going to tell you right now that's not happening. The Blue Jays are not getting Juan Soto. But I will say that I would imagine that Miami has a pitcher for the Blue Jays. There's too much talk about Luis Castillo for me to be like, that's the one. So maybe a Pablo Lopez, maybe. That would certainly be a player of interest for the Blue Jays front office, I'm guessing. But I don't know. I thought about Frankie Montas as well, but that kind of went down the toilet. So I think that for me, I'm going to go ahead and say Pablo Lopez. Karen, go ahead.
I've kind of got my heart set on Luis Castillo, but And then again, pretty much any contending team probably also does. So yeah, I mean, it could be a Pablo Lopez. They're going to add to their starting rotation. It's going to be a significant upgrade. So that's Castillo, Lopez, or I mean, who else is out there? What is his name with Texas? Martin Perez. He's having a phenomenal season, and he's on an expiring contract. So on one hand, he's a rental. On the other hand, it shouldn't cost them the farm to acquire him. Get him and one relief pitcher and one-stop shopping, maybe.
the one-stop shop. Love it. Steve, who are they most likely to acquire?
Well, because I have zero faith in Ross Atkins being able to pull off a big deal like Castillo or whatever it would be. Okay, because he has the yips. He has trading yips. That's what he really does. I am going to say it's David Robertson of the Cubs. And perhaps another veteran piece. They have some veteran pitchers that they could include in the deal, but I think it's going to be a relatively minor deal, and I'm going to say it's going to be David Robertson.
I wonder if they would target somebody who is, and I hate using this word, but the kind of the Robbie Ray broken that they traded for and then fixed them. Somebody like that, high strikeouts. Maybe, but anyway, I don't want to extend the conversation too long. But those are the things that I'm watching for. Rocket has an excellent comment here. Just don't see any pitcher, even Castillo, being worth Lourdes, unless he's missing another name in this starting pitching trade market. And I don't think you are, Rocket. I think that the value of Lourdes, I think, comes down to individual opinion at this point. I think that there are people who are just attached to him and see his value here in the Blue Jays uniform like Karen does. There are people who understand that he has a lot of trade value and aren't as attached to him. So, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer with regard to Lourdes, but Rocket, I want to thank you. Nick watching on Facebook says, Jay from the couch, real Blue Jays talk. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. And Will chimed in here. Love the Pablo Lopez idea, Sean. I think he fits very well in our rotation. The only thing I would say to that, Will, is that Miami is they're not in a place where they can wait years for the return to develop and all of that. So they're going to be looking for, I would imagine, closer to Major League ready pieces in return, if not Major League pieces. Steve mentioned Danny Jansen being of interest to Miami. Maybe there's something that can be done there. Who knows? But I think it'll cost a bit more than, say, trading with Cincinnati, who I don't even think they know what they're doing. I don't know that they understand how long the rebuild will be or won't be. All they know is they have Joey Votto and everybody's happy. So I think that's all Cincinnati is there for. Anyway, we are just about out of time, but we are going to bring our fake news segment, and we're going to cut it short because we're well over an hour here.
But you know what? No, the fake news can wait, because honestly, it's not that fake. So, so we'll wait on the fake news. We'll wait on the fake news at this point. I probably have enough people out there already angry at me. Between my last show and this one, let's pass on the fake news.
Well, the fake news is that we had a fake news segment. There you go. That's okay. There you go. All right. Well, then, before we get out of here, let's go around and, Karen, let everybody know how they can follow you on Twitter. And we are moving the Sunny Side of the Dome this week to Wednesday to accommodate my schedule, which I deeply appreciate. But let everybody know what we've got coming this week.
Yes. So, sunny side of the dome on Wednesday. You can follow me on Twitter at anytime at Karen Sutar1, so exactly like it's spelled there. And I'm on there a lot, so we can talk baseball or other reasonable topics where mutual respect is always there. And looking forward to Sunnyside on Wednesday, because things are really looking up for this team, and I really think the best is yet to come. It's going to be full steam ahead. They're going to add, and can't wait. I'm getting a 2015-ish feel.
Ooh, chills, literal chills. All right, Steve, how can everybody follow you, and what do you have for us tomorrow, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the On Feck Circle?
You can follow me on Twitter as well, at FecklessWonder. The ever-popular Shadow GM spot will be front and center. We're going to talk about people needing to temper their expectations from this front office. And I'm going to mention the word yips a lot throughout that segment. And then the Blue Jays bedtime story. It's going to start off talking about the 1993 expansion draft, but I'm going to build it from there and talk about how the Jays have built up players like Nigel Wilson, who was the Marlins' first overall pick in the expansion draft, and did such a great job of misdirection with their prospects, where they got people interested in guys that they really didn't see much or didn't want, and they held on to the guys that they really liked. So that'll be the On Feck Circle tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
Sounds like a lot of fun. And one last comment here before we go. Will, watching on Facebook, says, well done, guys and gal. Very good show tonight. Thank you so much, Will. I really appreciate you, A, you watching, B, you watching for the whole thing, and C, you commenting and participating as well. Means a lot to us. It adds more fun to the show when we know that people are out there. First of all, we know people are out there. But
yeah, and one of our fantasy league managers, too. So
that's true. That's
He's
true.
got turned on to the show through the league, so that's awesome.
Yep, and that's going strong as well. We're having a lot of fun there. Anyway, we are out of time here, but I want to thank everybody for commenting and tuning in. Rocket and Will and Christian and Nick and everybody else who didn't feel brave enough to to comment. Maybe next time, just send us a little question or a comment or anything like that, and we'll fire it up on the screen, just like this one. Despite my better judgment, but Will did beat me last week, so yeah. So now he's feeling brave enough to come on and comment, right? See how about that? I'm just joking, Will. But anyway, yeah. So thank you to everybody out there. Thank you for tuning in, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. It always makes for a great time knowing that you're enjoying it just as much as we are. Excuse me. Make sure first of all, you should be liking our Facebook page, getting all of our posts and notifications there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at Jays from Couch. And, of course, the audio version, take that with you on Apple, Stitcher, wherever you go. You can find it. So that's how you can get Jays from the Couch all up into your system. Thank you so much. Episode 304 is in the books, and I couldn't be more happy. I want to say a special thank you to Steve and Karen for helping me out every week and making the show what it is. If it was just me, it would be a hot pile of steaming garbage. So thank you both for joining me. So that's all we have for you this week. Head to jaysfromthecouch.com. I'm going to get that. I'm itching right now. I'm going to get that Alek Manoah piece done tonight, hopefully, and then have that up tomorrow. So for Steve, for Karen, for everybody at Jays from the Couch, this is Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter, I believe, at Doyle JFtC, hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.